Hey everyone, this is People of Substance by LemonSkies, and I'm super excited to introduce Steve MacLaughlin. I've known Steve for many years. I'm not going to say a million years, but I've known you for a while. And you're in South Carolina, in Charleston. And you're currently the Chief Product Officer, first one on the series to
Huh,
join me at a company called Unified. So
that's right.
please introduce yourself and say hi.
Sure. So thanks for having me on, Olga, and good to catch up here. We used to see each other at most of the nonprofit events every few times during the course of the year, but good to catch up here on the show. So I'm Steve McLaughlin, I'm the Chief Product Officer at Unified, which is a company that serves technology for the higher education market. And I started as the CPO there back in March of this year. So been very busy over the past 120 days, getting up to speed, building my team out, working there, doing a lot of exciting stuff. And then, 20 years prior to that, I spent a lot of time in nonprofit technology, over 18 years at Blackbaud. Prior to that, I was also worked in higher education, taught at Columbia University for a bit. So the whole higher education space is really where I've spent a lot of time. And so it's exciting to be able to focus there in just that one area, but still keep tabs on all the things, the comings and goings, and what's happening in the overall nonprofit world too. Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing you say, Steve, is I have to call you Professor McLaughlin for the remainder of
No,
this.
no,
No?
no.
Okay. And if you're looking for the company, Unified is spelled a little bit funky. It's uni, like university, and then FYED. So if
Yep.
you're looking, it's a slightly different spelling.
There.
Um, so Steve, I got to know you even before you and I met properly. I feel like I got to know you through some of your writing about trends in the industry and analysis. There's a lot of conversations about kind of state of giving and you know generosity, how some of it is declining, but there's some bright spots. What are the trends you're seeing in nonprofit at large, and then how does it differ, or maybe there are similarities in the higher ed sector?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely right. Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm a big believer. If you really want to understand your customers, if you really want to understand the market, you need to understand the dynamics, the trends, data. And that's always been really important to me. And in many ways, was something I've spent a lot of time on over the years. I think I've probably given close to 500 talks or keynotes or presentations, mainly about data, trends, what's happening, and it's a good way for me to sort of keep tabs on what's happening, but also would share with the sector and others what's happening as well. And even I continue to do that in my new role here at Unified, although it's more specific on what's happening in higher education. But so in general, here's what I'm seeing, because I can still keep tabs on things, which is, overall, there is a bit of a return to the new normal in the nonprofit sector if we think post-COVID pandemic. Um, there was a lot of what I call digital adaptation that had to take place for a couple of years, where suddenly organizations had to go partially remote or fully remote,
Mm-hmm.
and many are still in a hybrid state. So, how is it that they're setting goals, meeting, collaborating? In many cases, you've seen a broader adoption of technology out of necessity, right? Because of the nature of so many people being either in a hybrid environment or being fully remote now. And certainly one of the things I observed, going into COVID and going out, was that shift to digital from a giving standpoint. We saw a significant increase in the percentage of overall giving that happens online, finally eclipsing the 10% mark, which we've been stuck below for quite a while. But really, that shift when organizations went to a much more digital focused engagement approach, that led to a significant driver of giving in that particular direction. And we, certainly very familiar with the fact that I think Giving USA and some others reported that overall giving in the US was down in 2022 compared to prior years. I don't sort of consider that to be unexpected. The reality is there was a pretty large increase in giving when we think about 2020, 2021. So in some ways, is it returning to more normal levels or others it's decreasing? The biggest challenge, though, is specifically if you think about giving, is that since the last Great Recession, so 2008, we're still negative in terms of the growth of overall donors. So the number of donors giving has never really rebounded since 2008. And I think you're starting to see that play out now in some of the numbers where you've had well over a decade of poor donor acquisition, or worse yet, poor donor retention. And you just can't sustain that long term.
Mm-hmm.
You know, would always look at the data and say, well, how is giving, if donors aren't growing and retention isn't improving, how is giving growing? Well, because those who are generous continue to be more generous, but there is a limit to that. There's some, at some point that rubber band, or however you look at it, can't stretch anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you get into other economic factors and other things. So I think that's partly what we're seeing in the sector when we think about revenue that comes from fundraising, that there are some challenges, but it's not something that's happened overnight. Like, wow, what happened? Like, really? No, this has been going on for more than a decade. I think now you're just starting to see it show up. The flip side is, only about 12 to 15% of revenue in the nonprofit sector comes from fundraising. The vast majority comes from fee-for-service or government grants and contracts. And in some of those areas, there have been some bright spots. There have been some positive areas of growth. In particular, when I think about where I spent a lot of time in the higher education world, there's been some pretty positive trends on the revenue side in higher education, bouncing back from some challenging years to seeing some growth. But again, that's related to tuition, fee for service, those types of things. So yeah, that's my sense of where are we? That's where I think we are right now.
Yeah. Well, and as you're talking about higher education and fee for service, I mean, I'm not thrilled with that just because I think it translates to tuition. But one question I had for you about the higher education, are you seeing, I've read recent articles, well, you don't have to get a college degree. You can instead take this course or just purchase a book, which we could, we're not going to talk about any merits of that. But are you seeing a kind of a decline in higher education prestige, desire for current students kind of to enter it, or do you feel like it's steady?
No, I think there's a couple of other points. One of the areas that's been growing a lot is this whole idea of continuing education. What sort of we at Unifyed talk about this concept of people are lifelong learners.
Mm-hmm.
So the old construct was you have a student goes to school for 4 to 6 years to get their undergraduate degree. Then they go out into the world. Maybe they come maybe they go to medical school, law school, but that's it. And it was a cycle that was built around that. That's really changed and continues to transform itself. There are a lot of opportunities now for individuals to come back for more certificates, ongoing programs, certifications, continuous education in other topics. Because the reality is, if you're like me and you got your degree a few millennia ago, the world's changed. And if you're looking in terms of a career shift or you're looking to level up a particular skill set, there's a lot of growth in these continuing education programs, and they're being offered by wide variety by institutions, and also a lot of it quite frankly, is digital, right? I can get that ongoing certificate or an ongoing continuous education program. The education, which I value, right? Not as interested in the piece of
Mhm.
paper that goes on the wall, but I actually want the knowledge. I want the learnings. So there's a lot of that is continuing to grow and diversify, and certainly was an interesting byproduct, I think, of the pandemic. Certainly saw this at Blackbaud, seeing this again at Unified. A big surge happened during COVID around training, professional development, because a lot of things weren't happening, right? Events got canceled, conferences got canceled. People's normal ebb and flow of what they were doing was interrupted, and a lot of institutions took that as an opportunity to get some training, get some professional development, let some folks, because we're living in different times. And certainly, I think I've definitely seen that carry through, where there is still a lot of growth in these programs. And also, this doesn't just apply to somebody who wants to go learn about AI, cloud, or
Mhm.
whatever it happens to be, but this is in the nonprofit sector as well. Um, where you're seeing more of these programs start to pop up. As I said, for a few years, I was in the nonprofit management program in the graduate school at Columbia University, teaching a course on data there. And Cindy Lott, who used to run that whole program at Columbia, is now at Indiana University, and she's building another graduate level program around nonprofit and those sorts of topics. So I think, again, I think you're seeing there are opportunities for professional development for maybe that person who wants to be an executive director or CEO or someone looking to level up in a particular area. There's more resources than ever before. Besides, oh, go read this book or
Yeah.
go to this conference. I think it's encouraging for sure.
Yeah. So I was thinking about your role as product development, and I sort of got wondering how much of product development comes from um, unmet needs that you identify versus how often, organizations or clients sort of don't realize what they need until they realize, oh, this is what's possible.
Yeah, that's a bit of science magic of technology. Um, it's funny. I spend a lot of time, speaking, writing, talking about these data and trends. But my day job for 2 decades now has been building products,
Mhm.
and so there is a bit of a magic involved in there when you're trying to understand, um, not just, hey, what feature should we build this feature, make it a blue button, but really trying to dig into what's the unmet need, or what is the question that the user is trying to answer, or the problem they're trying to solve. Or if I really think about how we're sort of trying to push things, um, what's the ultimate outcome,
Mhm.
right? What is the outcome that we're trying to get to? Because oftentimes, when we're doing things like what I call sort of product discovery, where we're talking with customers, or we're digging into a process that they do today, we're trying to understand how they work, or we're getting feedback on something we've prototyped or something we've built. What we're really interested in is understanding, again, what's the problem you're trying to solve, the outcome you're trying to reach, because that's the really valuable part. It's not so much having an end user tell you, well, if you just added a blue button in the right corner, that's all I need, and things would be great. It's like, that's actually not what I mentioned. It's like, why
Mhm.
do you want that blue button? What do you want that blue button to do? What if that blue button could automatically do something for you? What would that be? And what I found over the years is you just have to get really good at asking uh, open-ended questions, and you keep digging, right?
Mhm.
Why? And eventually you unearth sort of that really golden nugget of, oh wow, so if we could do this, or if you were in the system, if the system could automatically do this thing, or if it knew this was the problem you were trying to solve, would this be valuable?
Mhm.
Because this is, I think there's a Neil Gaiman quote, sort of the author, uh, where he says, when people tell you uh, something is wrong or not working, they're usually, when they tell you how to fix it, they're usually wrong. And so
Mhm.
that's the trick a lot of times with building good products, which is when people are giving you feedback about what's working or what's not working, they're usually spot on. Focus on that. When they start to suggest how to fix it, it's usually not quite right because sometimes they just don't know what's possible,
Mhm.
right? Like, for example, especially in the age of machine learning, AI, or automation, they just might not know that, wow, you could do that. Like, you mean I could put this information into the system and the system would start to give back recommendations? Or you see a lot of use of chatbot technology, which, you know, takes advantage of AI, machine learning, other kinds of things where you mean it could help people answer questions without having to talk with a
Mhm.
human to get the basics right? Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the exciting parts is digging into
Mhm.
what is that really valuable thing that could be done. And it's not usually obvious. If it was obvious, anybody else would have already
Sure.
figured it out, right?
Well, I love that idea also of unearthing something that solves exactly the pain point, but they never quite realized what it was that would solve it. And by looking at the pain points and kind of insights, really listening, identifying what needs to be addressed, and figuring out how.
And also, how do you? It also has to be something that can be done, right? So I don't know if I'm infamous for saying this, but like I'm a big believer. Like ideas are easy, strategy is
Mhm.
easy, execution is the hard part.
Right.
Oftentimes, people like to separate the two. The strategy and education, or
Mhm.
strategy and execution, are two separate things. Sort of like there's heads and then there's hands.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't get done right, that couldn't be because the heads got it wrong. It's because the hands got it. And
Mhm.
I believe that I've had enough experience, practical, real experience over way too long to understand now that it's both. Strategy and execution have to go together. You can build you might have an amazing idea or an amazing strategy, but if you can't actually execute on it or deliver on it,
Right.
then it doesn't mean anything, right? It's like that's easy. I could come up with an idea right now for like, oh, what if we put wings on frogs and did this thing on Mars? Okay, how are we actually going to do that? Well, I don't know. I just think it's a great idea. Yeah, so part of the learning curve and part of what they get excited about doing with teams is following that idea through to execution. And
Mhm.
oftentimes, you find out is 90% of your ideas are bad ideas. Like they're not going to. But that 10% that's actually pretty good needs a bunch of iteration, right?
Mhm.
By itself, it's not like oh wow, it's genius. It's knowing when to say, okay, this is part of the 90% that's a bad idea, that's not going to work, and then putting all your time and effort and focus into that 10% where if we keep iterating on an idea,
Mhm.
can we get it to a place where suddenly, wow, uh, this is breakthrough, right?
Mhm.
This is really amazing. And it takes patience, and I think partly just an acceptance of you got to keep working on things uh, over time if you want to get better.
So just in case anybody missed, 90% of ideas, it's okay that they don't come to fruition. There's no such thing as, yeah.
It's not a judge. It's not personal, right? I've just like for a long time just use that number. Like, yeah, ideas are great. Keep them flowing. Let's just be really clear that 90% of them are going to be usable.
Yeah.
They could be on the cutting room floor, and that's okay. We just need to make sure we don't spend way too much time, effort, money, resources on those
Mhm.
90%. That where we really spend our time on is the 10% with a bit of work and a bit of elbow grease and some more iteration can
Mhm.
be super magical. Um, and that's, I don't know, I get a lot of joy out of that process. And what I find, especially when I brought new team members on boards or things like that, if they're not used to working that way, they sort of think, well, what was wrong with that idea? It's like, it's not personal, right? It didn't say, you were a bad idea. That
Right.
idea.
Right.
Like, don't take it personal. What you're going to find is, let's focus on what we think, and part of that is being able to take an idea and drive it to reality. For me, that's what matters.
Mhm.
Um, and that is a rarefied skill. Uh, but it's also the thing that I find customers and organizations really benefit from is when you can do that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit from product development. I know, I was really, I'm a list maker, right? So I make lots of lists. I lose
Yeah.
half of them. I rewrite them, and I do like to write them. I don't love the apps, but you have some really interesting approaches to productivity and kind of some time management ways that you use that I thought were really interesting. And I think some of it is reflective of your personality. So I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Sure. Um, Look, there's tons of books and blogs and videos out there about productivity, and
Mhm.
everyone's got these life hacks and things that they do. Um, but I would say over the past 5 years or so, I've really sort of focused on an approach that I take to getting things done and doing stuff. And it was partly, honestly, prior to that, my approach to life and work was literally killing, right? I was put in, an extremely over the top number of hours,
Mhm.
obsess about the details, worry about things, anxiety over how things were happening. And, things come to a head in your life where you realize that way of working
Mhm.
is not sustainable if I would like to continue to be breathing and living in this universe. And so I took a lot of things I had read about and worked about, and this is probably a callback that we just talked about, like the idea to the execution, which is there's all these life hacks, but like what can you actually implement that
Mhm.
works for you? And what I found, the biggest change I made a couple of years ago and continue this day, is I have an approach to how I manage my time and my schedule that really works for me. It may not work for everyone, but works for me in a way that gets the results I want without me driving me to, quite frankly, an early grave. And part of that is I'm really big on time blocking. Time is the most precious resource in the universe, right? We're not getting any more of it. That's every day, every week, every month, every year. So how you use your time is super important. And the example often I use for people is if you show me your calendar, Olga, I can tell you what's important, or at least what appears to be important, purely based on what your calendar looks like. And we probably all see this. You've seen people with they've got the calendar and like every hour of every day is blocked as something. I can tell you that's a person who probably struggles to get things done because they spend all of their time jumping from thing to thing to thing
Mhm.
and a lot of task switching. And so part of what I started to do years ago was time blocks. And so let me give you an example. I've done this for a couple of years now. Every Monday is a people day for me. Every Monday, I have all my one on ones. So, all my direct reports, we have a 30-minute one on one. It happens every Monday. It usually happens before noon on Monday, and those don't get scheduled on top of them. So, if someone else says, "Oh, Steve, we've got a meeting about this thing, I'm just going to put it on your calendar for 9 a.m. on Monday," I just decline it and say, "Sorry, I've got a one-on-one. You need to find time on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday because Monday's a people thing. Unless
Mhm.
that's a people thing, but even then, I would probably tell them to
Yeah.
reschedule. So I start with my people first. Leader, not a manager. I believe my role is to, how do I help my team every day, every week? So I put them first on the schedule. Also helps that you put them first on Monday so that we start off the week on a good note. But it's the discipline to say, every Monday morning, I will be spending time with all of my directs, and how do I help them get a good start to the week?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't get scheduled over. The only thing that sometimes happens, for example, I've got a work trip with a customer next week. I'm unavailable because I'm flying on Monday morning. Those meetings are Tuesday morning, right? It just slides, but it
Shifts.
always happens. And if you stay disciplined about it, doesn't take too long, and I've done it for years now, where that's how I roll. That's how it
Mm-hmm.
operates. That's how it works. And then other days are blocked for other types of activities. And what I found over time is that block scheduling is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I need I need, you know, quality time to get really good work. I find that in general, my best work happens in the first 2 hours of the day. That's where I'm most refreshed. I have my most energy. Uh, so on Tuesdays through Fridays, if I've got a really important thing or something that demands my best work, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where, because I know that my energy, my focus, um, things like that. And it's just an approach I've used for a number of years now. It takes a little bit of discipline. It also takes a little bit of telling others, hey, I know you reached out, you want to have a meeting about such and such. I have those calls on Thursdays. So you pick a spot on Thursday, and anywhere you can find, we can talk about it on Thursday, because Thursday is planning day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a day I use for planning and those kinds of things. It also helps because, and there's a lot of books that are out there, but I think the best one on this is by Cal Newport called Deep Work, which is the task switching, right? You move from one meeting to the next meeting or one topic to the next topic. Like, that destroys creativity, destroys your ability to really do deep work. So it's another reason why I do the block scheduling is, Mondays are all things people related. I can keep my head in that zone
Mm-hmm.
for all of Monday. Or I know that on Fridays, when we're having sort of reviews for the week and we're spending time with cross-functional teams, my head can be in that zone because I know that's what's happening there. Takes some discipline, but I believe it has made me a better person, a better leader, and I really believe I do better work because of it.
So it's fair to say that you don't embrace bare minimum Mondays or whatever that ridiculous trend that was floating around for a while.
I don't know what that is.
So the idea was that on Monday, kind of take it easy, like don't do as little as possible, to just ease into the week, to take care of yourself. So
No, I definitely don't. No.
it's
Um,
a Gen Z thing.
I'm not familiar with this concept.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, I'm a growth mindset type A kind of person. I am.
Mm-hmm.
This morning we were having a cross-functional meeting with all the leaders across customer success, customer support, product, and one of the things I put up as a reminder is the from Star Wars, the stay on target screen from episode 4. And just remind people, like, we got a lot of things going on. I know we're all busy. There's a lot of things happening. We need to stay focused, and we need to keep our teams focused on what are the most important things, because there will never be a shortage of things we need to do. That's why it's so important for our ability to stay focused on what do we need to get done now,
Mm-hmm.
and then what does that mean for what do we need to do next. And look, I get that that's challenging. I think, especially in a remote world as well, brings with it different distractions, different things like that. Uh, and I've, for most of my career, always dealt with a geographically distributed team. So I've sort of was used to that, but there are nuances to it. So helping people to stay focused, or in many cases, clarifying what is the most important thing, or and usually most cases, you can have three most important things. Everything else likely isn't going to happen until those three things get done. So trying to focus there too, I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
I love the purposefulness of that. So, Steve, you worked with so many different causes and organizations over your career span. I wanted to ask you, what are some causes that really personally stuck with you, and what, if any, charities you personally get involved with? So, how did professional flow into personal?
Um, I'm not. That's a great question. I think the more I found over time was in many ways, the professional is personal, or the personal is professional, especially when you choose to work with nonprofit organizations or higher education institutions. Very early in the beginning of my career, I worked with primarily, Fortune 500
Mhm.
organizations, and yeah, we helped sell more product or market the thing on the internet. But was it really making a difference in the world? And I'm a definite believer that certainly past 20 years of my life, working primarily with those organizations, it is important. The mission of these organizations is important. There isn't a personal importance in the work that's being done by them. The number of orgs over the years, countless amazing stories. Spent a couple of years on the board at N10. I was on the board of the N10 for a little over 8 years, and then eventually I went to Andy Sample, who was the CEO, and said, "Love the work N10's doing. Would love to stay on the board, but I feel like I've been here too long. I feel like I'm turning into that guy. That guy
Mhm.
who's, well, we tried that before, and I said, I'm becoming the person I can't stand. So let me pass the torch to some other folks."
Mhm.
One organization I need to have involved for years. I've done some work with Georgetown University. Specifically,
Mhm.
there's a program called Business for Impact, which is in the McDonough School of Business there at Georgetown. And I've participated in this program a number of years, and I go there, I think, about 4 times a year. One of the things that they do is they several leaders from nonprofits all around the country, and it's professional development for people who are at that executive director, CEO level. I get to spend almost an entire day with this group talking about data, talking about trends, talking
Mhm.
about how to make sense of this. Um, and I continue to get value from going back for another one of these multi-day programs in September. And every time I look forward to it, because it's a new group of people. I do like the idea of being able to spend a bunch of time, not just sort of
Mhm.
I'm here for an hour-long talk before you go get a coffee and bagel, go to the next talk. Like, I get to actually feel like there's some quality time spent
Mhm.
uh, with these leaders, and it's just not me talking. It's the ability to then break up into groups and dig into particular areas that they're interested in more detail. So that the work that I keep doing with Georgetown, I've had to make decisions about what do I keep doing and what do I not
Mhm.
do. With those groups, it's meaningful to me, but also based on feedback, is helping them too. So yeah.
Yeah. So, Steve, just for wrap up, I wanted to play a little round of two truth and a lie with you. Have you ever played that before?
Yeah.
Are you familiar? It can be anything. Keep it fairly clean.
Two truths and
The bar is high. I learned that somebody I interviewed plays bagpipes. So, if you happen to play bagpipes, that's been done.
yeah. Uh, two truths. Uh, I am left-handed, but I write with my right hand. I saw Taylor Swift this summer in concert, and I have a large collection of Lego minifigures.
So I'm going to say that Taylor is true. That's very plausible. It's very timely. You're shaking your head. Okay,
No,
well,
it's okay.
I can totally see you having Legos, but I think you're probably just either like there's a trick there, like you're probably just left-handed, and you write with your left hand. So I think that's the lie, the left-handed thing.
No, that's true.
That's true.
Yeah, left-handed, but my
Okay. My son is right-handed, but he golfs with his left.
I can come in handy sometime.
Mm-hmm. So Taylor is a lie?
Yes.
Really?
Although if I could have gotten tickets, I probably would have went. Yeah.
No, it's amazing. Okay, but Legos, see, I called the Legos at least.
Yeah, there was a good guess for the Lego. Yeah, I tried to trip you up by the order that I put them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what tripped me up, I'm just thinking like Taylor was touring in concert, so that didn't seem not plausible. So that's why I went for it. Steve, it was so wonderful to have you on.
Same here. Yeah.
And I hope to see you in person before too long. And I just
Yep.
really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Olga, and thanks for having me on. Cheers.
See you.